Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions, brought to you by AmericanManganeseInc.com. Here is Phil Mackesy.
Martin Armstrong created the economic confidence model. He's author of The Greatest Bull Market in History, and he's founder of Princeton Economics. Stay up to date with Martin at ArmstrongEconomics.com. Hey, Martin, welcome back to This Week in Money.
Oh, it's always nice to be back.
Good to have you back. President Obama releasing his latest executive order last Friday, just before the holiday weekend. Great timing on this one. Obviously, they wanted to bury this one. It's called the Assignment of National Security and Emergency Preparedness Communications Functions. Wow, that's a mouthful, huh?
Well, I think all over what you're looking at is that you have to understand is that they are very mindful of how things develop in Europe and elsewhere, and they realize that that trend eventually is coming here, which is why they want the kill switch on the internet and these various things. And if you look at the timing of these things, you'll see that they introduced that bill after what they call the Arab Spring. And they saw how all the youth used the internet in order to organize to overthrow the governments in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a piece about it. I said, you'll see within a few months they're going to do this. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And the excuse is, we have to, we need this in case there's a cyber attack. If somebody's attacking the CIA, you shut down the CIA. You don't shut down the entire internet.
Yeah.
So what they're very concerned about is largely the civil unrest they're beginning to see in Europe. You have unemployment in Spain among the youth at running around 50%. All of this idea of socialism, per se, has, since World War II, is really coming home to roost at this point. And it's not that we shouldn't take care of other people that need it. What the problem is that they keep adding and adding and adding,
mm-hmm.
and then you have a huge bureaucracy. And if you want to see if there is any way that this is plausible or efficient, just walk into any motor vehicle agency and see how you're treated.
Yeah. Like a serf.
I mean, they basically hire the lowest of the low,
yeah.
and it's getting to the point. It's just really insane, and you have to really ask. All right, fine. When the New Deal started, it didn't take two salaries to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now it basically takes two salaries just to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
So you're beginning to wonder what's going on, and the debt just keeps going and going and going. And we just saw Scranton, PA.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor said, there's a court order says the unions went out and said he can't do this, but he says, listen, I don't have the money. He cut everybody's wages to minimum wage. Police, firemen, everybody, $7.25 an hour. He says, we got $5,000 in the account. What has happened, and we've, I'm preparing a book on this subject, but effectively this idea of always taxing the rich. President Grover Cleveland basically pointed out in the Panic of 1893, he says, the rich can hoard their money, they can pick up and they can leave. And the wage earner can't take his labor and put it offshore.
Mm-hmm.
And he always ends up, at the end of the day, paying the bill. And so you're either, practical and reasonable, or you're going to turn the country into an armed camp and prevent people from leaving. And so what's happening is you're seeing on a micro level, these cities like Philadelphia, Scranton, and so on, they have raised taxes to such a degree that they have chased most of the industry out and the so-called rich. And this is exactly what happened to the city of Maine in Germany, where the Gutenberg printing press was developed.
Okay.
They kept, they started looking, it was a boom, and the politicians started borrowing money because they're never satisfied with just living within the tax revenue today. So they go, well, we're going to be earning this money for the next, for forever. So then they start borrowing against the next 10 years worth of tax revenue. And then they can't pay the interest, so then they start raising taxes. Then people start leaving. And then at the end of the day, those that had created the boom all left. And what the city had at that point in time, they couldn't make the payments on the debt. The debt defaults. Now, in the good old days, like then, the creditors ran in, they sacked the city, and they burned it to the ground. So we don't have that sort of check and balance today, but it's the same. It's like a Shakespeare's play.
Yeah.
It's been going on for 400 years. The actors may change, but it's the same plot. It never, ever changes. A politician, no matter, I don't care if you talk about Republican or Democrat, they always have to borrow next year's revenue and spend that this year as well.
I'm surprised, Martin, being a Canadian, I have friends in the U.S. who tell me what their property taxes are like. They're already incredibly higher than they are in Canada. Tell us why you think property taxes are going to go nuts next year. I guess you already have.
Well, what's happening is that they're now realizing that they've chased everybody out that they can call, the so-called rich from the cities. So what's left? About 60% of the people, for example, in the city of Philadelphia pay no taxes. They don't earn enough to do so.
Okay.
So what do? How do you get revenue? And the only way to do that is indirect. So then they start raising property taxes, fines, penalties, stuff like this that does not, it's not defined by income. And that's what they're looking at. And so you're looking at, like, people don't realize, but, I mean, they always keep talking about the rich, but 70% of the employment is the small business owner.
Yeah.
It's not the General Motors, stuff like that. It's these mom-and-pop stores, that sell appliances or bread and milk at the corner, things of this nature. And they are the ones that provide employment. And what politicians just can't get through their mind is that they keep changing the tax code constantly. And from a businessman's perspective, why should he go out and hire somebody if he doesn't know what his tax bill is going to be next year?
We're talking to Martin Armstrong here on This Week in Money. President Obama talking about extending the Bush tax cuts for another year, but only, I hadn't noticed this before, but only on household incomes of $250,000 or less. What can we read into this, Martin?
Well, even that he's only wants to do for 1 year. I'm very concerned about that because largely what you're looking at is the tax bill on non-income, so investment capital, capital gains tax, things of this nature. It goes from 15% to effectively 45% come January.
Wow.
Then you're adding 3.8% for the Obama health care on top of it, plus your state and local and everything else. So the concern I have is that, let's say you have any kind of investment, stocks, you have real estate, whatever. You have a nice profit in it. If you sell this year, before year end, your tax bill will be 15%. You sell after January 1st, it will be 60%.
Ouch.
So it's not like a couple of percent.
Yeah, it's 4 times.
It's a huge difference. And these people in Washington they're brain dead. When you start having huge differences like this, a guy's going to sit there, let's say, gee, if I sell my stock December 31st, I pay 15% instead of 60%. I think I better sell. So I'm very concerned that, our computer models are showing much higher volatility starting effectively after Labor Day.
Sure, it makes sense.
And I think we're just really looking at a very, very serious period ahead in time. And I don't see what a lot of people have called hyperinflation. That assumes that the government is just going to continue to print. And it's a huge assumption. And effectively, you had Alan Simpson, which I just put on our blog, who's the co-chairman of Obama's committee to cut the deficit. Yeah. I mean, this guy stands up and calls the current generation the greediest ever, and because they actually expect to receive something on Social Security.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, you've paid taxes for 40 years of your life, and forgive me that I'm asking for something now.
Yeah.
And he actually had the audacity to call everybody greedy. What about their greed about constantly taking taxes? And what they're doing in Social Security is additional, because that's not income. So when they're talking about the poor, etc., okay, fine. They take their money out of their paycheck and they give them back a refund check, and they think it's like Santa Claus.
It's a gift.
It's their own money that the government's borrowing, not even giving them the dignity of paying interest on it. But when they're going to raise the Social Security taxes as well, and that is not based upon your so-called status. So if you are below the threshold, you don't have to pay income tax. It doesn't mean you don't pay Social Security. And the Social Security tax is now getting to the point it's equal to the income tax, and then the employer has to match it. So I don't see this as giving any kind of incentive to reduce unemployment. I think unemployment is stuck and it's going to continue to move higher. And they just don't understand what they're creating here. It's an absolute nightmare. And it's just ask yourself, would you go sign a rent for an apartment where the contract says the landlord can raise your rent anytime he wants if he needs money?
No.
That's effectively the way they run the country.
Exactly. Yeah.
They say, well, how much? If you want me to start this business, what's my tax liability going to be? Oh, well, we could change it any time. We're sorry about that.
And you can't know in advance what it's going to be.
No.
Yeah.
And like they stand up and they make these wonderful announcements and say, oh, we want to, for household income below $250, we want to extend it for only another year. So nothing. They keep changing this.
Yeah.
The one thing that if you want to create jobs, the tax code should be frozen. This is what it is. Okay, fine. Regardless of the percentage, everybody then can make a business plan. Apparently, those in Washington never have to do a business plan because they just print whatever they want. The rest of the world, if you're going to start a business, you can't even borrow money unless you have a business plan that shows that here's my profit and how I'm going to do it. How can you submit such a plan if you never know what the taxes are anymore? And we're getting into these huge swings. 15 to 60% is crazy. Our computer's been putting out this September, and it's been hard to figure, okay, what's going, and then you see all this taxes coming and all the craziness that these people are putting out. And it's like, hello, does anybody ever have a real job?
Something you pointed out is the uncertainty of knowing what the hell they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and even why they're doing it. That's going to cause so much volatility, right? That people just don't know.
They don't. That's one thing I learned from being a corporate advisor and global. You have countries, for example, like Macedonia, over north of Greece. They came out and said, okay, fine, look, put your plants here. We're going to sign a contract. Taxes will be frozen for 50 years.
Now, that's certainty, right?
And because what the problem is that you're going to build a plant. You want to hire workers. And then the government can change its mind at any time.
Yeah. What's that going to do to investment? Surprise.
It's more than simply, they say, oh, well, they're putting the jobs offshore because they save money. No, it's a bit more than that. It's also that there's certainty. Sometimes, people just want to know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And when you create this uncertainty, everybody sits back on their hands. Well, should I buy? Should I sell? Should I do that? And I'm looking at the taxes jumping up dramatically, and I even have to advise people in my family. What can I tell you? You better sell now. These municipalities are going completely nuts.
Yes.
I was driving to work this morning, and they have about 30 cop cars out here, and the road was blocked both directions, and they're just, okay, papers, please. And anybody that didn't have your insurance card or whatever, over there.
Yeah, might as well be a checkpoint, right?
Yeah, and they're giving, it reminded me of East Germany.
Yeah.
And, giving out tickets. I mean, this is totally unconstitutional. And there has to be some sort of probable cause to pull over anybody. But no, they just block the whole road and pulling over everybody.
Oh, remember the good old days of probable cause and all that stuff, man. Yeah,
I'm telling you, I'm getting out of this country as fast as I possibly can.
It certainly looks scary. Where are you headed to? Any ideas yet?
Probably Europe.
Yeah.
I think maybe Switzerland. This is just too insane.
Yeah.
It's just too insane.
Yeah.
I mean, in Switzerland, it's not the greatest, but I mean, if you go, public and it's tax-free.
Yeah, and the government isn't in your face all the time, every day, right?
Yeah. They're not as. I think that the attitude is much better in Europe than it is here. Yeah. And I don't know how we ended up with this nastiness.
It's incremental, right? It just happens every day a little bit more. It's not any one thing you can point your finger at. It's just a gradual erosion of our rights.
Yeah, I mean, all the foreigners that came to our conference, I didn't realize that to get into this country, they got to give their fingerprints.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, what? And again, that would be unconstitutional. An American in the ACLU would stand up and jump up and down.
Yeah.
You're a foreigner. You have no rights. You're not in America yet.
Everybody says, 9/11 was the worst thing that ever happened to America. But if you're from the government, it's probably the best thing that ever happened, right?
It's you have to realize is that, unfortunately, there was like a 4 or 5 page article in the New York Times about Vietnam and how the U.S. lied and the Vietnamese never attacked and all this other kind of stuff. It was all made up so they could do it.
Yeah.
And then you look at the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, and you begin to wonder about all these conspiracy theories about 9/11. I can tell you that 1 year before the first, terrorists from the first World Trade Center were there in prison in New York City. They drew the World Trade Center on the wall of their cell with planes going into it 1 year before.
Wow. They
came down, took pictures, made a big deal of the whole thing. That was it.
Yeah. Amazing.
And you begin to wonder, well, maybe they did know, and they said, let it happen, and we get more power. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems that way. You hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it certainly looks that way, doesn't it? And it certainly it has worked out pretty well for them that they can do what they like.
Well, that's why they created the Homeland Security, because they clearly had enough of this that all these independent agencies, which they have way too many of anyhow, that everybody had a piece of information, and they said, oh, well, we need one to collect it all. That would have been better. But you had so many agencies that all knew that something was coming and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the collapse in 2007 and the CDOs.
Mm-hmm.
It took 7 agencies to get separate approvals to do these things. So you have 7 agencies overseeing the same instrument, and nobody saw anything wrong with it.
Yeah, and all fighting each other for turf, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, why do we have so many then? And they all fight with each other, so clearly nothing gets done anyhow.
Yeah. And what gets done is that Joe Sixpack is the guy that ends up paying for all this.
Yeah, I mean, at least if you had one agency, they wouldn't have anybody else to fight with. Maybe they might do their job then.
We are talking to Martin Armstrong here on This Week in Money. You can find him online at armstrongeconomics.com. Hey, Martin, thanks for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
James Quinn is online at theburningplatform.com. He is also on Facebook and Twitter. Jim is not just another blogger with an axe to grind. He's a certified public accountant and a certified cash manager. So when he talks, we listen, right, Jim?
Yes. Thanks for having me back.
It's good to have you here. Summertime, school is out, and report cards are pretty much behind us. It's a great time to grade President Obama's economic performance. And boy, the grade is probably not, I'm guessing, what the White House is hoping for.
No, the recent payroll numbers were horrific, actually. And actually, they were even worse than what's been publicized. I actually did a post the other day. I don't know if you know about the birth-death adjustment that the BLS makes, which is it's an adjustment they make. Basically, they use an Excel spreadsheet model that guesses how many new jobs were added by small businesses that they don't capture in their surveys because they only survey large businesses.
What could possibly go wrong with numbers like that, right?
What ends up happening is they make up a number. It's thrown into the total number that's reported out there. And then, like, once every 1 or 2 years, they true it up and figure out what really happened. And generally, they make the last 2 times they've done it, they've had to adjust the number down by 1 million jobs.
Wow!
And they'll do that late on a Friday afternoon when they think no one's looking. So when I looked at those numbers, the numbers reported as being added in the last 3 months, which were bad to begin with, were like 60. 70 and 80,000 jobs. During those same 3 months, that model added 534,000 jobs.
Okay.
So basically a model that they've created accounted for all jobs that they say have been added in the last 3 months. When in effect, the day afterwards, you get a survey from the Small Business Administration that says small businesses' confidence index plunged in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
So what small businesses would be adding hundreds of thousands of jobs when their confidence and they said the biggest problems were sales were terrible and they had no confidence that they were going to improve. I don't think you hire people when that happens.
We're talking to Jim Quinn from theburningplatform.com here on This Week in Money. We're talking about President Obama and his economic report card, which is pretty dismal. Let's start, Jim, with his $800 billion stimulus package. Remember that? That was going to keep unemployment down.
Yeah, he had sold the plan as if you passed it, unemployment rate would stay below 8%. It was passed with nothing but pork for all of his contributors and the Democratic, and I think it was passed with 0 Republican support. So it was a completely Democratic bill. And by October of 2009, the unemployment rate had reached 10.9%.
Okay.
Or it reached 10%. So he said it would be passed and we'd keep it under 8. Today, it's still at 8.2%, 3.5 years after he's taken office. And the only reason that it's at 8.2% is that the BLS has the guts to tell us that 8 million Americans decided voluntarily to leave the labor force and therefore are not counted in the unemployment rate. It boggles the mind what they expect us to believe.
Now, we're right to be cynical about all of these figures, and it's really hard to separate the spin from the facts. You're pretty good at doing that. What are you seeing in terms of actual employed Americans out there?
It is still, right now, there's a real huge discrepancy. There are still 2.6 million less Americans employed than there were when Obama got elected. What's even worse is that of this approximately 3 million jobs lost, 11 million, we've lost 11 million full-time jobs and added 8 million part-time jobs.
Now, this is just since Obama took office in 2008, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just since he took office.
Well, how does this square with the fact that he's talking about how many jobs he's created since he took office?
Right. He's going to concentrate. He's going to try to spin it, and he spun it that from the bottom in 2010. So we have added 3 million jobs from the bottom that occurred in 2010, and that's what he will keep harping upon. But the fact is that almost all of these jobs are part-time jobs, no benefits, lower pay, and you can see that because since the report that was put out by the Federal Reserve that shows the net worth and median household income that had come out a couple weeks ago, the median household income has declined by 8% since 2007. So, even though there have been some jobs added since the bottom of the recession, they're all very low-paying jobs.
Sure.
in bad sectors.
So these guys are rating all jobs as equal. A job is a job in terms of job creation.
Right. That's the way they look at it. They don't, and they even consider somebody who works a full-time employee in their minds is 35 hours.
Okay.
I always, I've been working for decades, and I always thought 40 hours was a full-time job. I didn't know that 35 hours was a full-time job.
We're talking to Jim Quinn from theburningplatform.com, and we're talking about President Obama's report card. He obviously on unemployment, he gets a fail. What about spending? How's he doing there?
Yeah, that's the one I tried to focus in on my last article because I don't think people, I try to listen to what they say they're going to do, and we were told that the stimulus, it's a Keynesian method of jump-starting an economy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't believe in that theory. I believe in the Austrian theory, but the people who do believe in it say that if you put $800 billion of spending into the market, that starts starts the economy going again, and it gets things going. And the plan is that you spend that money, and they said they would spend it over 2 years, and then they would turn it off.
Okay.
And it would, because they would have gotten the economy going again, and you'd go back to a normalized spending level.
And how did that work out?
So I looked at it, and prior, the last 2 years of the Bush administration, the spending was $2.7 trillion and $3 trillion in 2008. So when Obama took office, he passed his stimulus package, and the spending went up to $3.5 trillion in 2009 and $3.5 trillion in 2010. And also during that time frame, the Iraq War ended, and we should have had significant savings from that. So, if he was to be believed, the spending should have dropped back down into the 3.2, 3.3 trillion range.
Mm-hmm.
If you just factor in some inflation, but the spending as of 2012 is 3.8 trillion.
Ouch!
So it's $300 billion higher than the two stimulus years. So it never. That's the thing. The politicians say what they're going to do something, and they never reduce spending. They never reduce spending.
So what kind of a grade are we going to give the president for spending?
I couldn't find one positive thing.
Okay.
He's tried. He's tried cash for clunkers, homebuyer tax credits, mortgage modification programs. They've shifted billions of losses onto Fannie, Freddie, and FHA. They've had zero interest rates for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Bernanke's tried QE1, QE2, Operation Twist. They're giving out student loans like they're candy. They've taken the student loan number up to over $1 trillion in student loans. Again, you have to believe that they're doing this to get these people out of the labor force so they don't show up in the unemployment rate.
We're talking to Jim Quinn from theburningplatform.com here on This Week in Money. One thing that President Obama did do well and got quite a nice grade here, and it's kind of a dubious achievement. Food stamps. The number of Americans on food stamps has just skyrocketed. Tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, that's the single biggest accomplishment of his presidency. He's done miraculously well at increasing people on food stamps. And that's where, he goes out there and says that the economy is improving and he's done a good job. But at the same time, from the time that the economy supposedly bottomed and should have been going up, 6 million people have been added to the food stamp rolls since the economy officially started recovering. It confuses me when he says he's a resounding success when it comes to economics, but people keep going on food stamps and it keeps going higher. And again, I'm a little bit cynical, and they have advertising programs to get people to join the food stamp program.
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, they have on buses and on billboards. So they're spending our tax dollars to encourage more people to go onto food stamps to spend our tax dollars.
Huh.
A cynical person might think that he's attempting to win votes in the upcoming election by getting as many people on food stamps as he possibly can, but that's only a cynical person.
Only someone who was cynical would say something like that. Now, let's talk about the next one here. I have never heard of this before. Social Security Disability Insurance. This is a real scam.
All of these programs, I think when they were begun in the 30s or whatever, they had the original purpose of them sounded good. And actually, I'm sure the Social Security Disability Insurance Program has a tremendous amount of people who should be on it.
Sure.
People who get injured at work and, permanently injured and, have a bad break in life. But it's turned into a scam. It really has, especially, and you could see it in the last, Did people suddenly, back when basically when Clinton was in office, the ratio of disabled workers to active workers was in the 3% range, 3%. Now it's at 6%. So we're talking in the space of 10 or 15 years. All of a sudden, there's twice as many disabled people as there were a few years ago. It doesn't make sense. And you're allowed to go on this disability for mental disorders, back pain, mood disorders, and that's the majority of the increases are for these. I think claims for mental disorders were 10% in 1982,
okay,
and now they're 33% of all claims. So if you claim you're depressed, you have a chance to get Social Security disability insurance, and 99% of the people who go on it never go off of it.
That's an amazing stat.
So I think it's about 13. The average is like $14,000 a year,
okay,
for the rest of your life. So if you go on it, if you're able to, catch a break and get on it at the age of 40, you've got, until you stay on it until you go on to Social Security. when you're 65. So you got 25 years on SSDI, and then you go immediately on to Social Security.
Classic.
It's already on course to be, because I guess it's separate from the Social Security fund, and it was supposed to be self-funding itself. It's going to be broke by 2015.
Wow, some scary numbers.
We're gonna have to bail that one out.
Jim, in terms of what can be done, let's start off with an overall mark for President Obama and his administration on economics. Would you just say they failed?
Yeah, it's an F. Yeah. It's a resounding F.
Okay. Where can they make improvements? Be a teacher for a second and show how we can do better. How the president and the administration can do better.
Well, they need to cut spending, but they will never do it.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants to. They keep talking about this fiscal cliff that occurs in January unless they extend, unless they come to an agreement before then. Ron Paul was the only person. Ron Paul has had a detailed proposal that said that he would cut $1 trillion of spending in the first 2 years of his administration. No one, Obama or Romney, has any plans whatsoever to make any cuts. Because when they say that they're going to cut spending, they don't even really mean that. They mean that they're going to cut the rate of growth of spending. So no one ever. So the $3.8 trillion that's being spent today, there's no one out there proposing that the number come below that. Romney or Obama.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what it comes down to. They have to cut spending. I'm certainly not, saying that we should increase taxes. I think that would be even worse. I mean, we've got there's common sense things that could be done. Our military is way too extended. We can't police the world. There's hundreds of billions there that could be saved. That could be your starting point. Then these entitlement programs, you can't slash them for senior citizens who are already in them. You have to put in motion something like the Simpson Bowles thing that would gradually increase the retirement age. First, so that it affects people on the younger side, and they have time to prepare. But no one's willing. There's nobody in Washington who really has any intentions whatsoever of doing any cutting.
Some hard medicine to swallow for these guys, and I guess we can easily say that there's no political will for these guys to improve things. Are changes going to be forced on the administration eventually?
Yes. I think it's Americans' mindset is we only do things when crisis hits.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but that's the way it works here. People just, we've got 315 million people. Most of them are, I hate to say it, they're willfully ignorant. They don't really care. As long as the ATM machine spits out $20 bills and their credit card works at the point of sale, all's good. They're not thinking about future generations or, it amazes me that they reported the budget deficit for the month today, and it was, I think it was $60 billion or, some ridiculous number. And year to date, this fiscal year, the national debt is up $1 trillion. So, and no one even blinks. If you had told somebody in the early 90s that we'd be running $1.3 trillion annual deficits, they would have thought you were crazy, a crazy loon.
Yeah.
They'd say that would be impossible. That'll never happen. And now we just run the $1.3 trillion deficits every year, and no one's even concerned. And they won't be concerned until we have a dollar crisis. Both the national debt is on track, whether Obama or Romney wins in November, to hit $20 trillion by the time the next administration is over. From 2007 to 2017 or so, it's more than double. And the only reason it's not a crisis right now is because the interest on the national debt is at about a 2 to 3% interest rate. So it's terrible, but not overwhelming. I think we're we're paying $400 to $500 billion a year in interest expense.
Amazing.
If interest rates just normalized to where they were pre-crisis, we'd be paying over $1 trillion in interest expense when our entire spending budget is 3.8.
Yeah. What happens then?
I think the dollar collapses.
Okay.
You'll have a dollar crisis. What happens then? I don't know. Will they hit a reset button? Will they then go, tie a new currency to gold or gold and silver or something? Who knows? I mean, the country's run by a few powerful men is basically who are pulling most of the strings. I don't know if they have a master plan or whether they're just winging it, but it seems like they're winging it.
Jim, you are a student of history and know quite a bit about the Roman Empire and how that fell down. Do you see parallels with what's happening today with the Obama administration and the Roman Empire?
I see it perfectly. I mean, as a society, we've just we've outsourced our wars to mercenaries and we've overextended ourselves. We are an empire, and we seem to think that we can dictate what everyone around the globe should do. Mm-hmm. But we're slowly but surely bankrupting ourselves. Rome, it took Rome centuries to fall. I don't give us centuries. I think things move a lot faster these days than they did back then. I mean, there's nobody militarily that's going to take us down or anything like that, but it's not necessary. We're bankrupting ourselves trying to police the world right now.
If there's one lesson we can learn from the fall of the Roman Empire, what would that be?
Hubris. I think we think too highly of ourselves. Yeah. I mean, I think a little humbleness in how we run our affairs would go a long way. It's I think Ron Paul said it, the golden rule, and he was booed at one of the debates for saying we should follow that. I think we have to rein ourselves in, but it's almost impossible. It's like our leaders and the people on Wall Street, their egos are so large and their hubris is, immense that we just have to be brought down. The empire will have to fall before we have a chance to rebuild it.
I can see all these guys being fitted out with togas, right?
Yeah, it's Caligula, right? I mean, you could picture Caligula having a big old party on Wall Street.
Jim Quinn is online at theburningplatform.com. He's also on Facebook and Twitter. Hey, Jim, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to our guests, Martin Armstrong and Jim Quinn. And thank you for listening. I'm Phil Mackesy for AmericanManganeseInc.com. We're back next week with another edition of This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.